That hasn't been made.
So E3
Yeah.
needs to be moved down into.
Yeah.
As follow on for how we do it.
Yeah.
Right, we're good to go. We need a reason and the it needs to be stated.
So it's an update on a matter that was already a public.
Okay, cool. Just to make sure.
Thanks, Amanda.
No worries. Wonderful. Good morning, Councillor.
Oh, well, that would be an audit point. Sorry.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome, councillors and members of the public. This meeting is being held here in the supper room of the Waihinga Centre, Martin Borough Town Hall. It's being live streamed and it will be available to view on Council's YouTube channel. The emergency exits for this room are the door you came in and the exit behind me. We need to evacuate the building from the exits and assemble outside by the playground. Please remain at the assembly area until the building has been confirmed. Can I invite Councillor Gray to open the meeting with a cup of tea, please?
Kia ora te marino, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana, hei huarahi mā tātou e te ranginei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou e a tātou tātoa.
Apologies. We have apologies stemming from Mayor Connolly and Councillor Olds and Councillor Macaulay. Are there any other apologies? Councillor Plummer, will you move to accept the apologies from the above?
Yep.
And do I have a seconder? Sorry.
You go.
Okay, Aidan. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against say no. The motion is carried. I just would like to point out that Councillor Maynard is joining us this morning on Zoom. Are there any conflicts of interest to clear this morning? Perfect. Are there any acknowledgements or tributes? Aidan.
I'd just like to acknowledge the passing of Mike Beckett. Mike lived and resided in Featherston for a number of years. He ran or owned the supermarket and ran that with Mike Van Workum. I can't recall how many years they were in business together, but they sold that business to the supermarket, the Trust House. Mike Beckett then moved to Martin Borough here, where he was instrumental in setting up and publishing the Martin Borough Star, the monthly local free newspaper, and he continued doing that even when he sold up and moved back to Featherston a number of years ago. I think he's going to be a great loss to the whole wider South Wairarapa community. He was very vocal. I've heard one resident say he was quite opinionated, but then that doesn't do anyone any harm to have strong personalities offer their opinions about what's happening across the district. So just to acknowledge Mike's passing and condolences to his family.
Thank you. We will move on to public participation. We have one presenter today, which is Gary Dittmer. Gary, can we welcome you up to the table this morning, please?
On that Mike Beckett, big lesson there. He was an excellent boss for the people and treated people very kindly.
So I'll just remind everyone, particularly you, Gary, that you'll have 5 minutes this morning, and Katie will raise her hand at 4 minutes and again at 5 when your time is up, and the elected members will be able to ask questions of clarification.
Just before I start on my time, I said to Martin I'll help him. I've watched a few public meetings here. I think it's disgusting. I was always brought up that when someone comes to speak to you, you should have respect. You should shut your computers. you should sit and listen and look at your speakers and show respect. People come here in their time to come and present for you because you've been put there by the people here, and you should show far more respect than what I've watched in the videos that takes place. Now, this is not an attack, this is to improve, because Martin, I have heard independently from contractors that you have changed your ways in the last couple of months in your communications with contractors, which I feel is very good. But that doesn't stop me from attacking, because we have to get better than what we are.
Thank you.
Yeah, and-
You need to start your time, though.
It's dictatorship. Dictatorship is a controller. A dictatorship works with closed doors. Democracy, the democratic system, is you guys listening to the public. When you have a 50 to 68% concept that the public supports something, that's when you are supposed to move on a subject only. You don't have speakers come here and say, sorry, we've heard this before. The most important thing is to know that you need to support, but understand what's actually required out here. Every time you turn a speaker down because the speaker before spoke on something, you're missing the point of the whole purpose of democracy. And that's what I want to say there, right? But please work better and show more respect for people that come here to speak. They allow 5 minutes, give them the 5 minutes and turn your laptops and flick them down and show respect for it. Now that's for the people out there, I want you to do it. But, you can start with what I want to now. On the subject of what I'm here about, I gave you those papers, but here. I've just been handed a letter to the answers of questions here. But do you councillors, did you actually answer those questions? I know I'm not allowed to ask answers from you, but I do want an answer from you afterwards. I want you to phone me and tell me that you did take part in these questions. The answers I've been given, which I haven't read because I've only been giving them. The point is, that letter was addressed to the Mayor and South Rupert District Councillors. That means that you are the ones that are answering that letter, and you're responsible for whatever is in this letter. Now, the question that I raised, and I don't think you guys got it when I gave it out to you, that rate take and these figures are so contradicting. I asked again later on for more figures, and this is what I got later. If you have a commercial, if you have a town and you have a commercial area and you have an urban area, how come you get in the urban area commercial lifestyle blocks? These here figures on these pages here don't add up to anything on all your other stuff. It's serious. You can't turn around and segregate areas and then call commercial and urban when you've already called commercial Featherston or Martinborough. This is serious stuff, and you're not actually getting to the bottom of it. You don't understand. You're probably working with figures that aren't correct, which is why we end up having all these disputes. And there needs to be someone, we need to get to the very bottom of the truth of figures before you can even move into the next year, into this year's rate take, because you haven't established. You've got nothing. I can't even find any correct information here for you to be able to judge or decide on your decision making. And it still stands like that now. I haven't read this, so I'm going to be blind on that, but it's you that actually answered that letter, not council office. The big question that I don't understand is, why did the council sit here and approve 24.4 when Harry decided to pick 21.3? Why do you even sit here if Harry is right? I'm not saying he's done anything. He's saving money. That's is probably a reason for it. I'm not going to argue, and we're not even going there. It's just the sheer fact, the decision making that you passed 24.4. Why did you pass that if you actually didn't even take heed of what Harry's saying we need to cut? But for Harry to individually go 21.3, that's a serious question for the public to actually want an answer to. Because it puts Harry in a tricky spot and it puts you guys in a tricky spot from that situation for the people out there. So what is, you've got to actually start really questioning. Personally, I would not like me getting this information, even though I request it. I don't like it because it's always wrong, but I don't want it to be wrong. I want you guys to get it right and get it so that you're all on a common level and you do understand. I am not going to criticise for the statement, but I listened in those meetings and some of you councillors said, and I praise you for your honesty, I don't understand accountancy. You've actually said it in this meeting. I've watched it. I'm not knocking that, that's good. But what the point is, you must take the time to actually learn as quick as you can the fundamentals of accountancy.
That's 5 minutes, so I need you to wrap there, Gary. Thank you. Did we have any
Now,
questions?
my phone number at work is 30897764. And I want to know whether, because I'm happy you're missing anyway, whether you actually did take an input in that. Because
I think just for clarification that the letter that you have is a Legoima, so the Legoima will always be created by our officers. That's the process.
yes,
The Legoima that you have, yes. Thank you. Did we have any questions from councillors for Gary at this point? Aidan?
Gary, I'm going to ask if officers are able to share that Legoima result with us, so that we do get to see what you have been given today, because today you're the first one to have received that information. We haven't seen it. Yeah. So I'm going to ask that we receive that information so we know exactly what answer you have been given.
Yeah.
And certainly, I mean, I think some of the information you're referring to is probably from the last council, which finished up in October last year, so we can't talk about that. But certainly going forward, I think as a council here, we're all working really hard to understand the rate setting process.
All I'm trying to say is that all of us need to help each other. We need to get to the fundamental baseline to know that when we hold up a piece of paper, that is correct, right? Now, this here is not good, right?
Sorry, I'm just going to.
Hang on a minute, there's three things here.
Just need to stop you, Gary, because you only get 5 minutes, and we just need to be clear that as per standing order 14.7, we can't enter into debate or decisions at this point.
That is exactly what I was talking about, dictatorship. I've got a serious problem here. This is the part where you have to change your ruling. You're here to work for the good of the people. You're put in by the people. You're there to represent the people. You're not there to be a dictator and work to that.
We just need to work within the process. That's not
Here's a
dictatorship.
very good question, and that question should be asked by all of you. We need to get to the bottom and do it, and to eliminate your problems. I'm not here to attack you. I'm here to fight to get the system working good, so that we can.
Gary, as councillors, we are working to do the best we can for the ratepayers in the community.
But I'm talking having the right figures given to you. I'm not denying your energy. I'm talking about the surplus information.
So, Mr. Dittmeier, we, as a courtesy, because we knew you were presenting, we gave you the information that you've got, which is our reply. We will circulate that to councillors so they can see, because we've responded to every one of your questions in that reply.
Yeah, I'm not. Look, I'm outspoken only because I'm not speaking for myself. I'm speaking for the people that are struggling out there, right? And it's like someone has to do it. I don't really want to even. I'm doing it for that one reason, just like you were here, right? But what we do have to do is get to the bottom quickly. This has gone on. We're nearly into the 3rd month for this, right? So it was back in February 2008. Now, if you've got a serious issue, and if you were taking that serious, someone would have phoned me and said, geez, we better have a talk to find out a bit more information to see where we are going, right? And to get to the bottom of it. That hasn't happened. That's not a very good sign where I stand for a business. because you are a business where you're running as a business system. There's nothing wrong with.
Mr. Dipper, the chair has asked, the rules of engagement, 5 minutes.
I understand.
We've heard your concerns. And we will provide the information to council so they can understand what staff have provided to you. If they have questions on that, they will ask us.
So just quickly, as you're speaking, are you confident that the councillors know everything, that be happy with everything in there?
No, that's why we're going to have it circulated to councillors. Councillors, have we got any actions that we want to raise with officers following Mr. Dittman's presentation?
Simply, it's just a note.
Simply, it's a-
Thanks, Harry.
The response.
Thank you for your time and to present to us today.
Thanks, Gary.
Please do that for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Moving to extraordinary business. Is there any extraordinary business today? Eden.
I would like to request that council consider under extraordinary business, that council consider the new delegation infrastructure and community services committee under agenda item B4, which we're going to have today, which is delegations register amendments. The reason I'm asking for this this extraordinary item is that the item wasn't included within the agenda as published earlier on, as it was not required that it was going to be needed up until the last couple of days.
Do I have a mover for Aiden's motion? Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Walker, and Pip, will you second that motion? Thank you. All those in favour?
Fine.
Okay. All those against? Thank you. The motion is carried. Item A8, community board. Are there any chairs of the community board or the Māori Standing Committee? No. Are there any comments that any of the councillors would like to make on the recent meetings of the Māori Standing Committee or the community boards? Okay, we will move along to item A9, minutes for confirmation. We are considering the minutes from the 22nd of February 2023 meeting. Are there any corrections needed? Do I have a mover to confirm the minutes of the council meeting? Thank you, Councillor Gray. And a seconder, Councillor Plummer. Thank you. All those in favour?
Right.
All those against? The motion is carried. Any comments on the contents of the minutes? Any matters arising from the previous minutes?
Through you, Madam Chair, we have a response that we provided an email to you regarding the public participation from Mr. Woodyer. In lieu of a report, what we would like to do is table that reply, and if so, it's in the public record that he has been replied to. And if there are any questions regarding that reply, which you have the opportunity to read, you're more than welcome to ask, and Mr. Corbett will be more than pleased to answer any questions.
No, I'm fine with it.
Do we need to?
No, we'll just note that it has been tabled and will be attached to the minutes of the next meeting.
Thank you very much. Moving along to the decision reports from the Chief Executive of the Council officers, beginning with item B1, the adoption of the Wairarapa Youth Strategy, Te Rautahi Rangatahi o Wairarapa. We are now considering report B1, the adoption of the above strategy. Mr. Corbett, would you like to add anything to the report this morning?
Thank you, Chair.
Councillors, are there any questions?
Through you, Chair. Just reading through that strategy, I'm just wondering, I've got a few questions and I don't know whether, Stefan, you'll be able to ask the right answers. But I was just wondering, initially, what are the goals of the strategy? How will the goals be achieved? What is the timeline to achieve the goals? What is the cost of implementation of the strategy, and how are we going to ensure that we get value for money?
Two questions.
Just a couple of questions. Did you want to speak to that, Stefan, or did you want Councillor Bosley and I to maybe start with that?
Yeah, I think, thank you, Chair. I think it's two councillors in the team who have been shepherding this work through on behalf of the elected members. They're members of the Wairarapa Policy Group, and I'm assuming they'll probably be better placed to answer those questions for you, Councillor.
So if you're happy, I think the goal really is to have a rangatahi lens or voice on far more of the decisions that we make. This particular policy or strategy, the work that has gone into making sure that the rangatahi voice sits within this has been immense. And it's designed to allow us to better implement that lens into our decision making. And I think in terms of cost, it's a question that I asked early on as well. And the answer that I got was that this strategy isn't about making big promises. We aren't promising Disneyland in each of our towns. It is about having our rangatahi have a voice rather than making big promises. So I believe that, as with anything, there's a spectrum of cost, but I believe that this particular policy can be implemented at a low cost. And in terms of a timeline, from now until forever, I guess there's no set implementation at this stage. That is part of the next piece of work. But this strategy is aimed at allowing us to better do our jobs going forward.
Yep.
Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that covers it really well. Yeah, it was kind of, I think it was about, as I said, giving them a voice, actually being listened to, and it was a pretty comprehensive study that was done. The outreach was huge.
Yeah, it was.
There was a lot of agencies involved in going out and talking to the kids
Mm-hmm.
and getting back, and that was pulled in, and it was sort of, filtered down, narrowed down to, what are the key things that, some didn't want Disneyland.
Yeah.
But a whole lot of reality is really about, I guess, what we perceive youth want and what youth actually wants.
Mhm.
And that is achievable.
So I certainly saw in the strategy, the appendixes, what the consultation was, and how many rangatahi was spoken to throughout the Wairarapa. But what are the steps or what are the stages in the strategy that, or what are the steps and the stages does the strategy provide for rangatahi to have greater involvement?
The question you're asking about is the implementation plan, and the implementation plan, that piece of work within the paperwork is the next bit of work that we need to do. So part of what we'll approve today is to allow the officers to continue that piece of implementation work. We've got Councillor Maynard and then Ms Bradley.
Thank you. I see here that so the feeling is, from what I'm understanding, if you guys could just clarify, so that full engagement, that the whole spectrum has been reached right across the board of rangatahi, and I mean there is quite a large, a very diverse group that's been spoken to. I'm just wondering, when it came to refining it, why there was 19 rangatahi from across the region, and how many of those represented the South Wairarapa? So that says from on the, so this is where it explains it on the 7th of December 2022, with the full workshop. And because I guess my main concern is that the South Wairarapa area, we had good representation out of that 19 rangatahi who were spoken to, and so we have a good understanding moving forward.
So I don't have the number of rangatahi from South Wai involved in that final group off the top of my head, but I do believe there was definitely representation from all three districts on that final panel. And my understanding of that final panel was, yes, like you say, it was about refining and just making sure that the work that had been done by officers was still reflective of the rangatahi voice. And Steve was involved with that work as well from a South Wye perspective as too. So we have definitely had an active participation and voice in the structure of this strategy. Sorry, Amanda.
Just back to your, thank you, Chair, just back to your point around strategy. So a strategic document sets direction and helps decision making. So it's not about implementation. It shouldn't have details around what you are doing in action. That's the next step, absolutely. And the LTP would be a really good opportunity to apply the rangatahi strategy to your thinking and to your decision making, and going, this is what youth said that they were really wanting to prioritise, and that would help you start thinking about what some of the priorities might be in the LTP going forward. I think the other thing is gone out of my head.
That's all right, that's fine. That's your fault.
Excellent, Plummer.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to take a point that Aidan raised. And look, I understand why we've got this, but in this day and age right now, we've got really big, important costs that we're facing. And I really, to say, oh, we can absorb this within existing budgets and so on and so forth, and we're paying 28% of it. I'm not quite sure that we're in the position to actually just say things like that at the moment when we're looking at the pressures on our rates and the pressures on our things going forward. I've got no problems adopting this, but I've got a real problem saying, let's carry on with this at the moment. We haven't had the discussion about costs. And if it's going to cost us $50,000 in the next 12 months or the next 3 years, well, that's money that we really need to have a conversation about right now. And maybe it's something that we need to actually say, yes, we accept this, but until we've had our rates discussion, until we've had things and we know what we're going to spend money on, let's park this until we're in a position that we can actually say, yes, we can allocate money to the next stage. And I know you're going to say, oh, we absorb it within existing staff time, but actually our staff time is a cost, and maybe we've got better things to do with our staff time than things that aren't actually doing our roads and doing our water.
Just to confirm, the split of costs is the cost that's already cost to have the strategy created.
Yeah,
correct.
but the next cost is an implementation cost. And that's there's nothing in there that says, what's that going to cost?
No, the exact piece of work is the next piece.
Yeah, so what's it going to cost?
Sorry, that wasn't what I was
No.
I remembered my point, which was back to your point around so having a voice. One of the options has been looking at representation of young people, for example, sitting on a community board. We used to have a youth rep on our community boards. That's a very low cost way of getting a young person's voice in decision making. That would be simple to implement, would be very low cost, and was something that they were interested in doing.
Mr. Corbett.
Thank you, Chair. I think South Wairarapa has been behind the eight ball for many years in relation to having a formal approach to how we deal with youth issues in our region. And the other councils have had that framework, had that lens before us. And this is an opportunity for us to now catch up and to have a well-planned, reasoned, intelligent, sensible framework that we can address youth issues through. And it doesn't cost you any money. When you talk about Hanakura, you think about youth. When you talk about the formation of groups that make decisions or offer you feedback, you think about youth. When you think about transport options, you think about youth. It's in the same way that we must consider the interest of mana whenua or our age people, we must also think about youth actively, demonstrably. And this gives you that ability to do that. And there's some low-hanging fruit around political voice. And there are other things too that you can do. For example, when we're consulting on an important piece of infrastructure like the Wheels Park, which is obviously targeting youth, we make sure that we hear from youth about what they want and how they want to use it. And we put that up in lights. We make sure that we're doing what we said we would do. Then later on, if there's money in our back pockets, I accept that there isn't much in our pockets at the moment, but if there's money in our back pockets, it'll be more meaningful, perhaps in partnership with others or through a community grant scheme or external funding, what have you. Then you also have that opportunity to look at that as we further implement the strategy. This is something that's going to be of use to you and to us for 10 years.
Look, I don't disagree with anything you've said there, Stefan. Like, I'll come back to the strategy is supported by implementation plans for each council and identifies a range of projects within them. South Wairarapa District Council's implementation plan is forthcoming. All I'm asking is, what is it going to cost us? And
Well, we don't know the answers to that yet because we
Okay, so-
haven't the implementation.
but this document is asking us to approve the implementation strategy.
No, it's not.
No,
Yes, it is.
no, there is, within the paperwork, with point number 7 says, we note that a detailed implementation plan will be drawn up and circulated for comment in the coming months. In the meantime, we will ensure any new policies or major initiatives will be given consideration to this policy.
That in itself has a cost. A detailed implementation plan has a cost. You can't walk away from that. And yet, you know, our staff have got really important things to do. I understand the strategy. I've got no problem saying, let's have the strategy there. But I'm talking about right now, when we're in the middle of workshopping our annual plan and things, we need to actually sit back to say, yes, we've got the strategy. Implementation, that can be delayed. We don't have to do this work now until we've actually decided where the money's coming from. What are our priorities for money?
Is there any point in investing in the creation of this strategy if we're just going to pop it on a shelf?
Well,
If we
where's
just
the money coming?
pop it on a shelf, is there any point in the work that's been done to date?
I'm not suggesting throw it away. I'm just saying, hey, have a conversation about where does this sit in the priority of spending in our annual plan and our long
I
term.
do think
All I'm
number 7 gives us the opportunity to have that conversation at a later date. That's my opinion.
Sure, I think that we can reassure the councillor that that's exactly the conversation that you would have when presented with any investment options in the future. That is certainly what we would intend to do. It's just that, councillor, we don't need to let that stop us from moving forward now.
Is there any further comment? Councillor Maynard.
Yeah, I do refute actually a little bit of what you said, Stefan. I think you're quite wrong when you say that South Wairarapa has been behind the 8 ball in involving rangatahi or youth in general for when things are done, like the Waihinga Centre, moving things like the Plunket, having the school involved in things. There's actually youth involvement and having youth representative on the board. So for 2 trienniums with the community board. So it's a little bit. I think there has been engagement and involvement with our youth, and so I just want to point that out because it's not ignoring. It's very, very difficult sitting in a position that we do on council and yet knowing how important things like mental health and things like that are to our youth and not being able, because it doesn't fit within our stratosphere. And that's what I want to see happening with this, is that it's actually looking after their well-being and not just socially, you know, not just going out to the playground, but it's actually making sure that there's those safe spaces for them. That's my main concern when it comes to our rangatahi.
Thank you, councillor. Right. Any final comment?
Oh, just to say, Chair, that I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not suggesting in the slightest that we haven't heard our youth and done many meaningful things for our youth. That wasn't what I was saying. What I was saying was that this strategy would be the first time that you'd be offered a framework through which to make future decisions that rest on the entire, feedback from a very wide range of youth across the entire region. So I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not saying we haven't done anything for you. I'm just saying this is an important lens and tool that you can now use in the future.
Yeah, I'll just, thanks, Stephen, for everything you said, and Pip, fully understand what you said too. I'm a little bit with Alistair worried about what this costs down the line. And as councillors, when we make decisions on anything, we should be taking everyone into account anyway. I'm just a little bit on Alistair's side about whether we just have some talks about what costs are as it moves forward, just how fast we push this with the restraints on things at the moment. So.
Okay, so do I have a mover to move motions 1 to 7? Thank you, Councillor Bosley. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gray. All those in favour say aye. Got. Sorry, was it you as well? That's everyone. Yes. It's quiet this morning, folks.
Three speak up.
Yeah. Give me a holler. All
I
those.
think it's important that most of these are notes.
Yes.
We're noting that there is things that.
All those against. I know. Thank you. The motion is carried. Item B2, the adoption of the Wairarapa smoke and vape free policy. We are now considering report B2. Councillor Bosley, did you want to add anything to this conversation?
No, I mean, I think I made my comments at the meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, on there.
Katie.
I will take this document as read. Just a few notes above and beyond what is reported is that on the 29th of March, Carterton District Council adopted the Wairarapa smoke and vape free policy, subject to the amendment that areas identified as smoke and vape free areas include those areas outside of education facilities. From the 11th of May, 2021, all schools, early childhood education facilities and care centers must, in addition to displaying no smoking notices, are also required to display no vaping notices as well. So the amendment by Carterton District Council does follow the existing legislation. The wording has not been finalized, but we're happy to work with Carterton and Masterton District Councils to incorporate that, subject to support by councillors.
Councillors, any questions on this policy?
Not a question, but just a point to make around the difference between smoking and vaping. There historically has always been a push from governments to try to move smoking out of the public spaces because it's offensive to people that are around it. So being exposed to secondhand smoke is a health risk. It smells bad. It's not. It impinges on people's enjoyment of spaces. So that's always been the main reason for trying to get smoking out of public spaces. The same logic doesn't carry over for vaping. So trying to reduce vaping is a health strategy, not necessarily, I don't think, a planning thing. And I say this as somebody who doesn't vape, but it is a harm minimisation tool that we use in healthcare. So we encourage people to go from smoking to vaping as much as possible. The problem in society is that people take it up when they haven't been smokers and then they end up with a vaping problem, which is a different thing. But I just want to be very clear that when we're talking about these things, that we're doing it for the greater good, not necessarily just for individual health choices.
I think there was a sentiment of the group was around, particularly vaping, around as you the impact and the uptake of our young people. So a real view to do what we could to try and reduce the uptake of vaping in our youth.
But, I'm going to abstain from this because of my other hat. But I just make an observation on it that you might want to consider as a council that when you look at the maps, if you go to Schedule 1 of the thing, Masterton, for example, includes Huey2 Park. And I find it very interesting that Carterton includes some open space, but our three towns, we don't. We only include the town centre, and I find it really interesting that we're excluding our sports fields and things that are council owned. Where actually the very people we're trying to target with this is our young people, and that is where they congregate. They don't congregate down in the shopping area; they congregate in the parks. So why are we? What are we missing that Masterton's got right? Or Masterton's
So within the policy itself, it already includes sports grounds, public facilities, public playgrounds. There's quite a list that are included within the policy. The town center maps are specifically identifying the town center areas outside of the spaces that are included in the policy themselves.
Councillor Woodcock.
Yeah, I'd like to put the point what you were saying. Personally, I find it quite offensive from people vape around me. I can't stand the smell of it. And whether or not, I know they do it to push smokers to vaping. Supposedly it's better, but the sort of book's still out on that because it hasn't been around long enough. And I know there are serious harms being created with especially young ones, your lungs and that with it. And whether or not the secondhand vape is actually harmful to others as well is still sort of not really known. Personally, I think it's quite a good idea.
Councillor Evans.
Through you, Chair. Question that I've got, who's going to enforce the policy?
It's not an enforcement policy, it's an inform and minimisation.
That was discussed at length at the meeting about, how does something like this get enforced? And so that can't be, we simply, we can't have people walking the streets in high-vis vests going to anti-vape police.
So how are we going to get the message out?
Through signage.
Signage and sponsorship. So, for instance, if a community group came to us looking for sponsorship for an event, we would apply our smoke and vape free, potentially apply our smoke free and vape free policy to that funding and say, well, actually, maybe we only give money or sponsorship to groups that are actively promoting our stance on smoke and vape free. So there's ways of implementing it in that way without, as Councillor Bosey says, having the vape police up about.
So I think it's, if we're going to bring in policies to try and change people's behaviour, if there is no enforcement, there needs to be education and to ensure that people's attitudes and behaviours are modified and changed. Rather than just having a policy for the sake of having a policy, and it's toothless.
So any enforcement, anything like that will have to come through central government, right? So we can at a local level, this is what we can do until central government brings in legislation as such, like smoke-free policy, and there was legislation around that. I'm waiting for central government to catch up to the position that we can take this stage around education signage. So when I say enforcement, I mean enforcement, but in terms of policies around, what is the council's position on this in terms of grants, funding, etc.
Thanks.
Any final comments before we move on? Do I have a mover for points 1 to 6, please? Thank you, Councillor Bosley. Do I have a second? Okay, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, please say no. I'm just noting that abstained. The motion is carried. Thank you. Did have tentatively lunch booked at this time, but we're still early and we are whizzing through. So if everyone's happy, we'll just carry on. Item B3, the review of the Wairarapa Plus 4 gambling and standalone TAB venues policy. Ms. Carmichael, would you like to add anything to this report?
Yes, so the Masterton, Carterton and South councils currently share a class 4 gambling and standalone TAB venues policy. This policy has a 3-year review period and is due for review under legislation. Unfortunately, that is just something that we need to comply with. The Wairarapa Policy Working Group has delegated authority to support the review process. And the review process will follow the 4 stages outlined by the Department of Internal Affairs. This is just requesting that council note that this review is.
Councillors, any questions? No. Move on to the recommendations. Do I have a mover for points 1 to 4, please? Councillor Woodcock, do I have a seconder? Councillor Maynard. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, please say no.
Abstain, sorry.
Abstaining, and the motion is carried. Thank you. So item B4, the delegations register amendments report. Bradley.
Good morning, still by 2 minutes. The main reason for these changes to the delegations register is largely about the restructure of committees. So because we no longer have a planning and regulatory committee, the delegations that were made in the delegations register to that committee, we don't have a committee. So we have to update the register to make sure that we've got a suitable place. So I'll just take the report as read, and if you've got any questions.
So there's any questions from us? That's a no. Sorry, Katie, the update to yes.
Yep, so you'll need
We
to
didn't need to do that
do
as
It's extraordinary business.
Yeah, but it's at the
added as consideration under this item. So yes, if you wanted to do the recommendation that's there regarding the delegations register, and then you can do a second recommendation.
Do I have a mover to agree that Part C of the statutory delegations from council to officers under the Resource Management Act 1991 be updated as per appendix? Thank you, Councillor Williams. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Plummer. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Motion is carried. So we'll now move to the update of the delegation of the ICS committee.
Did you want to?
Yeah, so we have plans called reserve management plans. Those plans, there's one plan for each of our reserves, and they're managed under the Reserves Management Act. That this is not an area of expertise by my understanding at all. It's a Russell's team space and Stefan's team space. Those reserve management plans have particular.
Apologies, is this what number is this?
This is B4.A. This is from extraordinary business.
Oh, is it a physical copy of something, is it?
It's the matter that Aidan raised at the beginning.
Yes, I just, is there a copy of something that I'm meant to have here?
No,
Okay.
don't have it. So
Amanda's just going to speak to it.
Right, so there's no physical information for me to look at while you're speaking to Amanda?
no. So it's what we would like to do is put a delegation in the terms of reference for the Infrastructure and Communities Committee to oversee and make decisions on the reserve management plans. So that's the logical place for those plans to have delegated authority. So those plans include, for example, things like consultation on changes to the use of those reserves. And the reason that this has come up is because there is a water bore in Soldiers Memorial Park, and Wellington Water would like to replace, update that water bore, and it is specifically listed in that reserve management plan as requiring consultation. And rather than take that to council, the suggestion has been that it will sit with the infrastructure and communities committee, which is the most logical decision maker. So it's just delegating the authority of those reserve management plans to that committee.
Can you just confirm then, what was the reason for it needing to come back to go out to consultation? How did that come about? Like, what did the papers explain about that coming about in the first place? For Greytown?
So that's in the reserve management plan for Soldiers Memorial Park. That's where I can send everyone the plan, particularly those that are on the infrastructure and communities committee. But I've been through it with Wellington Water and James in quite a bit of detail, and I've spoken to the mayor and the deputy mayor about it informally.
So currently, we've got reserve management plans for Soldiers Memorial Park in Greytown.
Yes.
The square in Martinborough.
Yes. Considine Park in Featherston.
Considine Park in Martinborough.
Oh, Martinborough, sorry. What's the one in Featherston? Card Reserve, thank you.
Stellable Park.
Stellable Park.
So, yeah.
What's the one with the train? Is that?
Oh, Phil.
Clifford Square.
Sorry, management plan.
So,
Thank you.
so essentially all the reserves out in South Wairarapa, they have reserve management plans. So the desire is that any decision-making process or consultation for those reserve management plans goes through infrastructure, community services committee, rather than being dealt with by the whole council.
Yes. Yeah.
I do have some concerns with regards to that. I think it needs to come back because it's a district problem. You know, it's actually a district concern.
We'd be dealing with each individual reserve management plan at a time. So we'd only be ever dealing with
Through a committee rather than at the council table, right?
Yes, that's the decision that needs to be made today.
I think our infrastructure and community services committee is the largest committee within council. So we have
7.
a large membership from across all 3 wards. And I'd agree that by having it sitting at infrastructure and community services will certainly expedite the process.
Agree.
Right. Were there any further comments?
So I do just have one more. Aidan, as the chair of that committee, it seems that there is a lot that now sits under there at the moment. I'm just wondering, so would it be expedient, do you think?
I think it would certainly be more expedient to have that decision-making process through ICS committee rather than perhaps coming to a full council and then being.
You could put it through the Climate Change and Environment Committee.
Because it's a reserve.
Because it's in the environment.
The main red side view, Madam Chair, is if it was a reserve management plan, it will come to ICS. It would be then ICS would then recommend to the council.
No, that's not what we're asking.
Right, then just let me finish.
Sorry.
Right. That would be that. So what you're avoiding is this 2-step process. So that the ICS, when they consider it, rather than making a recommendation to council, they can exercise a delegation to approve it.
Yes.
So that's what you're stopping is the 2.
We're cutting out a step. We're asking to cut out a step. Yes.
Yeah,
Sorry, Harry.
that's right.
By cutting out that step, will the footprint? I think something else to be aware of when it comes to our reserves or green space is probably a really, really good word for these areas. Will the footprint of any changes or anything that's needing to happen on those reserves, we need to make sure that they're still absolutely minimal. which is where sitting under the environmental. So
Sorry.
Climate change and environment.
Ms. Bradley.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Maynard, I think one of the really big things about these reserve management plans is that formal consultation basically has to happen for any change to be done in any of the reserves. So that's a really tight requirement by the Reserves Management Act. So you couldn't make those changes without going out to public consultation anyway.
So that was my first question, which I had originally asked, which was about, because you said at the moment you're needing to consult, so that consultation process would still be happening. Is that what you're saying?
100%. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was a concern, so that's good to hear.
Okay, so do I have a mover to allow the delegation for the Resource Management Act plan, the reserve management plans to be moved from council to the ICS committee? Councillor Plummer. Here, and a seconder. Councillor Gray. All those in favour? Aye. Thank you. All those against? No. The motion is carried. Item B5. It's very warm in here. I have the air conditioning. Item B5, dog control fees for 2023-24. Mr. Mead, do you have anything that you would like to add to the report, please?
But I'll answer questions.
To answer questions. Councillors, do you have any questions for Mr. Mead this morning? Councillor Ealams.
Through you, Chair. I suppose my first question is, well, again, a number of questions. The cost of dog control to council each year, what portion of that cost is paid by our dog fees?
Currently at 78% is user pays. Paid by other things.
Great, thanks. And the two proposals there, these are 5% increase. What is that likely to, that extra 5% likely to bring in dollar terms? And then again for 10%.
Oh, I didn't do the 5% overall.
Oh, well, if you've got 10%, it's halfway half, right?
Do your own maths, Mr.
So the assumption that there's two assumptions. One is if it's 100% that everybody registers their dogs, that would be around about I think it's about, with quick maths, is about 258. No, sorry, apologies. An extra 14,000, 5% on the income total.
So 14,000 would be 5%.
That would be 5%. That's an increase of 14,000 on the income. Which would put you at
and 10% would be 28.
Yep, it's 28. Yep, correct. So 10%, that puts that 86% recovery.
Could I ask a question, Rick? Microchipping, have you got any indication of sort of percentage of dogs that are microchipped?
Currently, the ones that we know, so we can only say that the dogs that we know, we're around about 96%.
Okay. Should we then have a fee that is significantly higher for non-microchip dogs? If the whole point is to get microchip dogs, which makes it easier for your officers to do their job, and you know, it's the intent of government to actually have all dogs microchipped. Why don't we put in a non-microchipped dog feed, which is so excessively high, it is true, but actually get the dog bloody microchipped.
That's one solution, but you then assume that everyone is going to pay that fee and do it. Having a realistic price, which is cheaper than the vets, we've seen an uptake of those that are on the struggling line to pay to actually be.
I'm not talking about raising the fee to microchip. I'm talking about raise the registration fee for a dog that isn't.
Yep, so statutorily, you can only raise it 50% of your base fee. So that's.
We don't have one for non-microchip dogs. We don't have a.
But we would do an infringement for failure to microchip, which is an infringement fee of $150, which is under the schedule of the dog control.
So they'd pay the standard registration fee plus infringement for failing to.
Correct. Or we encourage them to pay the $20.
Do we do that though? If we've got 5% of our dogs are unmicrochipped, we know what dogs are because you've got the registration list.
Yep.
So when they come to re-register their dog, do we sting them for the $150 for unmicrochipped?
When they re-register their dog, we have a conversation to say that we don't on our register have your dog microchipped. You can microchip your dog for $20 with us, or failure to that, we can impose an infringement of that. Because there is confusion out there that people think their dogs are registered because of the Animal Companion Register, which is not a statutory register that's undertaken by the TAs or the National Dog Database. And so we found that some people say, hey, I'm registered, because that's where their microchip number has gone onto that private register. And so as soon as they tell us, we just add it to the register. So I suppose from an administration point of view and an education point of view, we've taken the philosophy of it's better that you come and talk to us and get it done for a $20 fee, and then it's done, as opposed to the punitive measure of whacking someone $150, which will then go non-payment, which will then get written off, and then we've put that person offside with us. So we've taken an opposite view, a more educated philosophy in that regard.
Thank you. Councillor Maynard.
Kia ora, Rick. I'm just wondering, with regards to we know that a lot of costs come from the impounding, so I'm just wondering why there's been no change with regards to for the first having to impound the dog, whereas the work that has to go in with them to have to be taken to somewhere and to a pound and be taken care of and everything. Why there's no change on that?
So the non-change is in regard to the first impoundment. So I've kept that at $80. The second and third I've increased to $200 and $300. So that's a $30 increase in terms of that. And the rationale behind that is I believe everyone can make a mistake, and why you would punitively sock it to them on the first round when it's an opportunity for us as officers to actually go and interact with the individual. And I think it's that balancing act of we've over 3 years have changed our way to work, in that I've encouraged the guys on the first time, if it's a couple of streets over and it's microchipped and registered, to actually take the dog back and not impound it. And therefore we get a chance to interact with that individual and check their property to see if we can actually stop non-compliance going forward. So that was my rationale behind that, was that first an opportunity or come to our attention may have come through, Guy Fawkes, it may have come through storms where gates have been left open by a courier, and that individual generally has never come to our attention. They've had this one incident, and so I felt that that's a sort of hey, talk to us. Yes, there is a penalty, but it's not so drastic that it turns people off to interact with us. If that makes sense.
Any further questions? Councillor Elens.
I think from memory going back, at some stage we had discussions about dog registration and dog fees previously, and I can't recall whether it was you or another council that talked about other councils and their examples of registrations and incentives being given for dogs that were chipped.
We've had that conversation in the rating review conversation, which is obviously quite separate to what Mr. Mead is trying to do with this. But it does link in again with, I guess, what Councillor Plummer was saying about having different levels of registration, taking into account good dog behaviour, good dog owner behaviour, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, now that has been some of the bigger councils who have teams larger than 2 officers and administrative requirements as well. So the more levels or differentiation of the fee structure, we're adding on to the administration implements it. And if you're going to do a good behaviour or responsible owner scenario, part of that would require an inspection and an update and add to the registration as well. So given that we've got 3,493 dogs, you're asking 2 officers to then potentially, even if there was an uptake of 20%, to go and do those inspections, which would add on the workload to what you like, for what value? I think the reasonableness of what we're setting is comparable right across our current district with Carterton and Masterton and Upper Hutt. And given the resources that we currently have, I think it's manageable and it's not adding to the burden of what we're asking staff to do as well.
So for those 3,493 dogs, do we know how many of them are chipped?
Yeah, I think it's 96%.
Right. Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Seems pretty high.
It's pretty high. Like, I mean, even our registrations, I think I've got 129 unregistered owners out there for various reasons.
And just to add to Mr. Mead's answer to Councillor Maynard earlier around why not raising the first impoundment, Mr. Mead and I have had several conversations around wandering dogs and dog ownership and things, and Mr. Mead is very clear on his position on education and improving both the relationship that he and his officers have with our community and with the perception that the community has of our officers as well. I think it's a very easy area to sort of be quite angry at and to assume that, you know, we're being very harsh, but Mr. Mead is working really hard in that area to genuinely improve the perception with our community. So I think your move that you've made, keeping the initial impounding low, is a good one. Sorry, Councillor Maynard.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I just wanted some clarification on why, and I can understand what you're saying there about first time where it could just be an accident and possibly, you know, or a new puppy that they haven't quite fenced in the place or whatever might happen. So you know, giving them the opportunity, I think, is a great thing. But 10% is 10% increase. Is any of that going towards the dog pound? So the new dog pound?
Indirectly, it would, and that because that would come in, the income comes in part of that jail or the general ledger for that area. So animal control money is spent on animal control. So if you clarify your question as to if there's a specific you're talking about, I haven't added the 10% to say to bring back on the capex that we spend on it.
Oh no, it's more for like feed and you know, someone that's having to go out there. So that side of the employment, you know.
Yep. So it's currently what we do now. So our responsibility under the law is that if we impound a dog, we have to go twice a day. We have to check up on it. We have to provide sustenance. That feeds in there. So that in terms of the activity by the officers would remain the same. And it'll be dictated by how many inbounds we do. Now, having said that, given that we've got within the district a touch wood compliant pound, it is likely that we may look at being less lenient on individuals because we actually have a facility that is both compliant but meets the health and safety requirements for my staff as well. So we're more comfortable to actually look after one's dog that we pick up rather than our current situation.
Awesome, thank you.
Any final comments before we move on?
Yeah, Madam Chair, just to add on to your valuable point is that as we've built that momentum or that link with the community, and there's been an increasingly more considered level of dog ownership and dog ownership responsibility, we've tried to build on from there and recognise that which is happening out in the community by individual dog owners. So we don't want to sort of lose that momentum, and we think that with our fee stuff, we've taken that on board as well.
Thank you. Councillor Elams.
I was just wondering as to whether it's possible to make an amendment to their recommendation too, that rather than doing a 10% increase, could we do a 5% increase this year and then forecast a 5% increase in next year's long-term plan?
Response to that.
Yeah, it's just that last year and the year before we had COVID originally, and I took the decision to be mindful of that. And the second one last year, I ate the 7.2 inflationary pressure. This year, it's to recover that as well as make sure that we're still meeting that 70-30 split. And I'm not quite sure the 5% this year would be a sufficient level, but obviously that's a decision you guys need to come up with.
I think the other point to that is, of course, is that fees are one means by which costs are directly targeted to the user. And if we don't do this, then the cost goes across the entire district in the form of rates. And if you don't own a dog, you go, why am I paying this?
Yeah, and as Mr. May said, we've still got that target ratio of 70-30 to meet.
So if you've got a D6 dog, the increase is $8. That's hardly.
Yeah, and that's been a conscious effort on my part to actually split that D6 an entire dog, because we would like to encourage D6 animals because for certain reasons. But if you want an entire dog, you need to pay for it. They tend to be a nuisance.
What we can take on board in terms of what you raised, councillor, is that so you're acknowledging the fiscal impact on some owners with limited means. So what we can do if we were to go ahead with 10% measure is to be mindful of potentially spacing out any further increase in future years. So taking on board your acknowledgement. So Russell.
I did, Councillor Woodcock, did you know? Right. Here I have a mover for the 2 points. 1, receiving the dog control fees report, and 2, accepting the recommendation that council adopt option 3, the proposed 10% increase. Councillor Maynard, and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Plimmer. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, please say no. The motion is carried. Thank you very much. We will take this opportunity to break for lunch. Thank you.
Fees like absolute.
I know.
Yeah.
What time will we be back?
12:45.
12:45.